Joining me today is Chad Wolf. He's the former acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security for President Trump and is a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Chad, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to see you again.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on.
Of course. Now, in previous conversations that we've had, we've talked about the Biden administration's handling of the border crisis. And first and foremost, I want to get your thoughts on something that the president himself said recently during a CNN town hall. He said he hasn't really had the time to go down and visit the southern border. The next day, the White House press secretary Jen Psaki said that the president has been to the border before. Back in 2008, he essentially drove through the border during a campaign event. He was on the campaign trail back then. Why is President Biden resistant to visiting the border?
Well, first of all, I think these are astonishing statements that President Biden made during that CNN town hall. And he went on to say, I guess I should visit the border now. And I would respectfully say now is not a time to guess. Now is a time for leadership, particularly when it comes to the border crisis. So absolutely, the president should have long by now visited the border. His vice president, the border czar, should have been visiting that border on numerous occasions. Again, has only gone to El Paso one time. So, it now more than ever is leadership is needed. And the fact that the president hasn't been to the border, I think he's just signifying that it's not that important to him and to this administration to fix the crisis that's going on down there. They don't consider it a crisis. They refuse to call it that. They continue to call it a challenge. And so I don't think that he or his administration are taking it as seriously as they need to.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, the vice president did visit El Paso earlier this year. For the president to go down himself, though, what do you think that would help to accomplish?
Well, first of all, he would understand. Hopefully, if he would go down there, he would actually talk to some of the men and women, law enforcement agents along that border, Border Patrol, ICE, and others, and they would tell him what they need, what the resources they need to do their job. They would also tell him the policies that worked in the past. And I suspect that they would also ask him to reinstitute some of those policies. So that's what he would hear. My guess is he's not going because he doesn't want to hear that, because they know what works and they're staying away from it for political reasons. And so I think he would run into, his visit would be frustrating for him because he would hear a lot of things that he would choose not to hear at the end of the day. We have a playbook that works. We know, some of the policies to put in place to solve this crisis. They're within his grasp, they're within the executive authority to do it. They're simply not doing it. So I think in some respects, that's why both he and the vice president are staying away from the border, because they don't want to hear what the solutions are, because politically they have already sent the signal that they're unwilling to take those actions.
And I just want to talk a little bit more about sending signals. We've been told time and time again that the border is closed. Obviously, that is not the case. We have the numbers here: more than 192,000 encounters in September, more than 1.7 million migrant encounters in the 2021 fiscal year. Just astonishing numbers that we're seeing. Can you walk us through what the process is for someone who crosses the border illegally and sort of, what happens after that?
Well, absolutely. Well, the numbers, let me just first start with the numbers that you cited. These are astronomically high numbers. It's hard to put those in context when individuals and the American public hear 192,000 or 1.7 million for this year. These are numbers that we have never seen before. In fact, they're all records, historic records, since we've started keeping track in total. And it just tells you that they have completely broken the system. We had a very secure border in 2020, 2019, 2020, and we have the complete opposite. And so when you hear individuals and administration officials say that the border is closed, the border is secure, yet we had 1.7 million illegal apprehensions this year, they're lying to the American people. And they think that the American people are stupid. And it amazes me that they continue to repeat this week after week and month after month. And I think it's quite astonishing. To answer the second part of your question, so as individuals come across the border, it depends on the demographic and the type of individual crossing the border. So if you're a minor, if you're under 17 years old, and the vast majority of minors that Border Patrol picks up are between the ages of actually 16 and 17. So they're not the 8-year-old or the 3-year-old. About 75% are between the ages, again, of 16 and 17. They are turned over to HHS. They're put in shelters, in facilities, and then released to sponsors. So many of these folks come across the border with a name and a number. And then the federal government calls that name and number and has them come and pick up that minor. And those individuals that they call could also be illegal aliens in the country illegally. So in many ways, the federal government is the last link in the human smuggling chain of having these individuals smuggled across the border, and then we connect them with that adult at the end of the road. If you're a family unit, the Biden administration has basically sent the signal that basically 4 out of 5 family units are released into the United States within hours. Within hours. If you're pregnant and you come across the border, you're released into the interior of the country. If you're other single adults, depending on if you speak Spanish, if you don't, most are returned to Mexico, most are returned to the Northern Triangle and elsewhere, but a lot are released into the country. And so you're seeing this catch and release system that the Trump administration that we did away with, again, back in 2019, you see it reinstigated and reinstituted here, and it's a complete disaster for our country. Look, President Obama had a similar crisis, and he understood you needed to remove people, you needed to send the signal. What the Biden administration is doing is so far out of the norm. When we talk about immigration enforcement and border security, that it leaves a lot of us just scratching our heads saying, what on earth are they doing?
And are these individuals, these family units, are they released into the country essentially without strings? Do they have court dates? I mean, how, and if so, how do you enforce that?
Well, it depends on where they come across. In the really busy Border Patrol sectors like RGV, which is the Rio Grande Valley there in South Texas, they simply can't process notice to appear, which is a piece of paper that they are given that tells them to show up at a specific court on a specific date at a specific time. Because they're so overwhelmed, they can't take the hour or two that it takes to issue that paper. Instead, they're just simply releasing them, saying, wherever you go in the country, if you go to Chicago or Seattle or New York, please go to your local immigration office when you can, and then we'll start the proceedings at that point, which is, it's the definition of both catch and release and open borders. We know that the vast majority of those folks will never show up, and why should they? They've just been given a complete pass to get into the country, and it's because they're overwhelmed at the border, because this administration has signaled and has made it so through administrative policy that if you come across the border, we're going to release you.
Chad, I just have one final topic that I want to discuss with you. President Biden has canceled multiple border wall construction contracts, and we're finding out this month that he is planning to build a $500,000 wall around his beach house. A lot of people have been calling this out as hypocrisy. Based on your experience, is a wall at the southern border, still the best way to secure our country?
Well, absolutely. An effective border wall system is desperately needed, and I say system because it's more than just that physical infrastructure. It's the roads, the cameras, the sensors, the radar, everything that goes along with that border wall infrastructure that the Border Patrol absolutely needs. It's part of an overall system of systems that they use along that border. And when you take an effective piece of that away, such as the Biden administration has done, and they've done it for political reasons, because if they talk to the operators along that border, they will say that they need an effective border wall system. We give our men and women in uniform the very best equipment and technology to fight our fights overseas. There's no reason that we shouldn't give the Border Patrol exactly what they need and when they need it. And yet this administration refuses to do that. Look, we've seen not only, at the vice president's house in Delaware, but we also saw it around the Capitol. What was the first thing that they did post January 6th is, Nancy Pelosi put up a fence around the Capitol. So it's okay to protect themselves. It's okay to protect the president. But if you want to protect American communities along that border, it's not okay. And so you're absolutely right. There's an immense amount of hypocrisy in their strategy and in their policies.